Hey, good evening, everybody. I wanted to do a brief rundown here on Buildship. Um, I've received some requests from people asking me to maybe give my opinion on Buildship or perhaps give some tutorials on how to integrate Buildship with your FlutterFlow apps. I honestly have not given Buildship much thought because I figured that it probably kind of fell into the same category of other middleware platforms that I don't use. And so I figured I probably wouldn't use Buildship either. So I didn't give it much thought in that regard. However, my YouTube creator account decided to show me yesterday I guess some tips of how to get more views, and some of that was like one of the top search terms was integrating Buildship with FlutterFlow, and it reminded me that I needed to address this. This is not a tutorial. I'm not going to show you how to integrate with Buildship because my recommendation is not to use Buildship. If you want to use it, I'm sure there's plenty of tutorials out there you can find to be able to do that with FlutterFlow. But what I'm actually going to do here right now is give you my take on it, a little bit of research that I did into it, and why I think that you are better off not going this route if your intent is to build an actual scalable, sustainable, affordable, and competitive app in the hyper competitive atmosphere that we live in with app development and app deployment. So you know, Buildship positions itself as like a no-code, low-code, drag and drop, fill in the blank builder for API endpoints. Of course, Buildship itself is not the like all of the services. It's not the API services. Buildship is an API endpoint in essence. Which I'll explain that in a minute and why that's a negative. But you still have to obviously connect to other APIs. So like, for instance, if you wanted to use OpenAI, their API, you don't just suddenly start using it because you sign up for Buildship. You still have to get an API key through OpenAI. So, that's kind of pointer number one is that you're going to be paying for this middleware service, this Buildship service, which is in essence just kind of a rebranded version of Zapier or Make. Excuse me. They're all basically the same thing, and that is just kind of a somewhat of a simplification of creating your connections to your APIs and making it so that you don't really, I guess, have to know much to do it. However, I find the interface kind of interesting looking at it. I mean, I've written my own API endpoints. I've done a lot of API development, so I know what I'm looking at. But generally, taking a brief look at this stuff, if you're coming into Buildship with the intent of it being super easy, you probably had this kind of the same outlook on FlutterFlow, and likely you discovered, or you will discover eventually, that FlutterFlow is a lot more complex than it seems on the outside. And if you really want your app in FlutterFlow to shine, then you have got to have a better understanding of code, Dart, if you want to do custom code inside of FlutterFlow. But you've also got to have a really good understanding of backend infrastructure, storage and CDNs and databases, and of course APIs and all those sorts of things. You've got to have a broader base of knowledge in how to develop those things. And again, FlutterFlow is positioned as kind of this one-stop shop, which it can be if what you're trying to build are static, essentially non-dynamic, non-moving applications. But if you're trying to build a social media app or something that has a lot of dynamic content, then you're going to have to know a lot more than FlutterFlow. And these services here are essentially kind of on the same level as that. But I mean, again, looking at this, there's still a slight learning curve here. And in my opinion, your time would be better served actually learning about APIs, like what these various things are, than learning how to navigate and utilize this platform. Because running API endpoints, running two API endpoints from directly in FlutterFlow using their API constructor is a piece of cake, quite frankly. It's very easy once you understand what these different things are. And then securely storing your API keys, also extremely easy. So, I mean, it's just a lot of this stuff in Buildship is redundant, and you're paying extra for it. So let me kind of dive in real quick into some key pointers, what we're looking at here. So this right here is, they call it path, but if you highlight over it, then it brings up path of the endpoint. So, I mean, this is an endpoint, essentially. I guess you can give it your own name if you want to. And then these are your methods: get, post, put, and delete. Just brief overview. Get is retrieving. Post is applying data to the endpoint, whereas this be retrieving data from the endpoint. Putting is essentially like editing. If you want to look at it that way, you're taking something that already exists over there and making changes to it. And then delete is self-explanatory. And query key, I think this specifically has to do with the chat, because it's a prompt. And then you're just setting a bool on whether it's a required. So is the prompt required? Yes. Because if you try and make a call to this open AI chat and you don't include a prompt, then it's going to spit back an error. More than likely, it's going to be like a 404 error, which means you're missing content, or a 400, depending on how they have it structured over there. A 200 error is typically a success, which means that it worked. So anyway, that's all that is. Then you got your API key, and like I said, at least I think I said this already, but even though you're signed up to use Buildship, and you might be using the free version for a little while, or you're already onto the paid version, which we'll get to all of that in a minute, you are still going to have to acquire an API key from OpenAI to use ChatGPT, which isn't free. So you're going to have to pay for this one way or another, and then of course pay for Buildship eventually, because you're going to have to scale up in Buildship. You won't be able to rely on their free plan indefinitely by any means, and even their starter plan is not good for anything that's at production level. And to grab API keys from OpenAI's API, it's kind of a pay-as-you-go thing, so you can kind of determine how much you want to spend in that regard. And it's pretty affordable, all things considered. And then, like this stuff, these are just parameters. That's all these are, parameters. And it's probably sending those parameters. Let's see, so I mean, they've got Node.js, I guess. They're using Node Logic, so Node.js. So in like FlutterFlow, you'd probably send this as JSON, I would imagine. But I mean, it's not overly complicated by any means. But anyway, these are parameters. So all of these parameters are probably, well, not all of them. So that one, and this one, those are all going to be string parameters. User request, user message. So yeah, that's a string parameter. Temperature is going to be a double, and then model will be a string. And so you type those into your variables and your string parameters. Your header, it's not best practice to serve your API key directly inside of your app. You don't really want to store it in that way. A better way to do that would be to use a cloud function if you're using Firebase, or a lot of these other databases also support some level of a cloud function, and you can utilize your own kind of secure keychain for your API keys over on your database side, and then use a cloud function to utilize them when making calls, which is again not hard. It's not a difficult process to do that, and you have a lot more control, and you're spending less money. But if you were to include it in your header, it's usually the header is worded something along the lines of authorization : space bearer, and then you type in your API key. Not rocket science, really. And so again, you're defining some other stuff here, just defining parameters, and that's defining parameters. Okay, so all of this stuff, it looks different in Buildship because they have it laid out differently, but in FlutterFlow, you can do all of these things. You can set your endpoints, you can set your methods, you can set your you can set up your keys. Again, I wouldn't do it inside the app, but you can if you want. You can set all your parameters, you can set your variables, and yada yada yada. You can do all this stuff. You don't have to do all this here. So let's kind of dive over real quick into a couple other things with Buildship. One thing that I was interested in with Buildship was this database thing. So anytime I hear about a low or no code database infrastructure that pops up, it's quite a few of them at this point, it piques my interest, and I'd like to know, okay, does anything set them apart that makes them better in terms of speed and usability and efficiency, cost, reliance, reliability, all of those various things. Most low-code database builders are always going to have those limitations because they're low-code. Yeah, it's just the reality of it. If you truly want to have maximum control and facilitation over your database, you're going to have to know how to develop your database using a less user-friendly method. But that's not always ideal for everybody, and quite frankly, for most apps, using some kind of low-code database is fine. And so exploring which ones are available and what they offer is something that I like to look into. So one thing I was really interested in was, okay, what does Buildship use? What is their database engine? What are they sitting on top of? And I did some Google searches trying to figure it out. I had actually thought about going and asking ChatGPT if it knew, but I wanted really to see how hard it was to find myself inside of Google and not just let AI do it. And I'll be honest, it took me a minute to find an actual answer, and I found that kind of interesting. Why Buildship doesn't just make that front and center, I'm not really sure, but I ended up finding it in one of their blog posts from last year. And the curious thing is, Buildship kind of touts this whole concept of you can build these databases inside of Buildship, and you can build unlimited databases, and it's so great, and it's all here and centralized and blah blah blah. But what I discovered was that Buildship's database engine is just Firestore. That's all it is. They're sitting on top of Firestore, and you can see if I click on database, I have to upgrade to a paid plan to be able to use it. I can't even start a database here, which is really strange given the fact that I can start a Firestore database in Firebase for free on the Spark plan, and that I can do quite a bit of extensive testing in that free plan without ever paying a dime for that database. But yet, if I want to try and deploy that database directly through Buildship, I have to pay for it. Now, I believe the reason for that is because they let you use their proprietary builder, I guess, for the database, which is based on Rowie, because Buildship and Rowie are built by the same people. It's the same company. And so I'm assuming, based off of their description here, that when you create a database directly inside of Buildship, you get to use like their Rowie interface to be able to work with it, but you can purchase Rowie separately from Buildship. You don't have to use Buildship. So if you really like the Rowie interface, you want to use that. Don't think that you can only get it here, at least for now, unless they decide to absorb them and create a centralized single platform. But it's really that's what you're paying for, because Firestore is inherently free until you need to step up your scale or utilize like cloud functions or push notifications, things like that. But you don't have to pay for it just to get started with it. So I find that kind of ridiculous. And I also find it ridiculous that Buildship, let's see here, let's go to templates. So Buildship, like one of the APIs that they provide the workflow for is the Firestore write read. So in Buildship's description, they say you can create databases in Buildship. You can directly link your Firestore to Buildship, or you can use the API to write and read to your Firestore. You don't need to do any of that, because you can use your Firestore directly in Firebase and completely cut out this $25 and up monthly fee with Buildship. So if you're looking at Buildship and the database concept is a huge decision factor for you, I would suggest just looking directly at ROE. Like if that's a big part of why you want to use the database in Buildship, and the database is kind of a driving factor for subscribing here, I just go look at ROE and not use Buildship, because Buildship doesn't offer a whole lot more, in my opinion, that does a whole lot of good for anybody other than take your money, really, and put just another link in the chain that can break. So anyway, databases, it's just Firestore. That's where you're getting. Now, as far as these templates go, looking at these templates, quite a few of them in here that are AI related. Quite a few. And most of these that I'm seeing in here are available on Replicate, which Replicate kind of simplifies certain connections as well, but it's a little bit more intuitive and less chunky, I guess, because what Replicate is, if you've ever used it, it provides people access to either deploy their own AI models, or to access open source models, which you can either download and run on your own hardware, which you've got to have some really powerful and expensive hardware, or you can go through Replicate and essentially rent time for the amount of seconds that you run an AI model on Replicate, whether you're training it or using it inside of your app, then you're charged for that time. So if you want to use any of these on here and you want to use it through Buildship, you're still going to have to pay for that time on Replicate or wherever you're accessing these APIs. Or you could just go directly to Replicate and do it that way and cut this out. And again, these are stupid simple. A lot of these APIs are ridiculously simple to work with. It's not a big deal. So anyway, I don't see a whole lot of use there. All right, so looking up here, let's see. Let's jump right here. Let's look at the upgrades. So with your free version, you can get 5 workflows. So I guess that's like this is a workflow. So my workflow is essentially just building out what I want the API to do when I make a call to it. So you get 5 in the free version. If you construct your APIs directly inside of FlutterFlow, you get unlimited at no extra cost. 3 execution hours. That's a joke. For 2-second workflows. 1 concurrent execution. That's a joke. 20 AI generated nodes. Okay, so let's look at the paid one. All right, so I mean the free one is really just so you can get your feet wet and see what Buildship can do. But you're not going to get a whole lot further than that. So let's start talking about, okay, you're actually giving them money. What do you get for that? So at the base plan, so 20 workflows, you can still have unlimited if you just don't use them and you go directly through FlutterFlow. 10 execution hours. All right, so 10 execution hours. 2-second workflows. That's that looks great in writing. It's like, man, I could do that. 2-second workflows. I mean, certainly these things aren't going to take more than 2 seconds. Well, you'd be surprised, especially if you're planning on using AI, which I find interesting that their templates are predominantly AI, but yet they kind of tout this 2-second workflow concept. To put that into perspective, I utilized an AI a couple of days ago, doing some testing, and I generated a 3D model using AI, and it took 56 minutes for that to generate, and 56 minutes was the average. It wasn't like mine was extremely long or anything. That was the average time that it took, and it was 56 minutes. And so what that essentially says is it was an execution time of 56 minutes, which on here I could do that like 12 times or something like that, and then I'd be out for the month. I could initiate that 4 times, and then, or I'm sorry, 12 times, and then some of those other AI models I was using would run for 5, 10, 15 minutes each. You're going to blow through your execution hours extremely rapidly. So that's really, that is not good at all. That doesn't provide you a lot, because AI related stuff, unless it's just simple text related things, like you're using a large language model and you're just wanting to ask it questions, most AI systems that are pretty intensive as far as media manipulation is going to take way longer than 2 seconds, even on really powerful machines, because it's a very resource intensive task. That's why GPU servers are ridiculously expensive, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. So that's just not realistic there. I'm going to come back to no rate limit in just a moment, kind of explain why that's hilarious. But 50 AI generated nodes. So you can use their AI builder to tell it what you want the API to do, and then I guess it'll create the node for you or whatever. But the issue there is that, you could pay $20, I think, a month to ChatGPT, to get access to ChatGPT 4, which is their their latest model that is really good at code interpretation, and you get unlimited code outputs. They do rate limit to some degree, but you still get unlimited outputs. You're not limited to 50. Or you could use OpenAI's API and create AI assistants, and there really is no rate limit, so to speak, with that, and you can again output as many as you want, and you just pay for what you use, not limited to 50. Or you could use ChatGPT 3.5, which is free, and there's no limit. So I mean, there's so many options out there for generating what they call a node, but generating API code or whatever you're trying to generate with AI, that you can do for pennies on the dollar or even free, whereas you're getting limited to 50 with this for $25. Now down here, 100 gigabytes of storage. I'm going to assume that's with Firebase storage, since they're already sitting on top of the Firestore engine. 100 gig of storage, that really is not that great, to be honest with you. I currently use a service where I get 100 buckets, and each bucket is 100 gigabytes of storage, and I get that for $5 a month. So 100 gigabytes for storage, that's going to get blown way out of the water real quickly. And if it is sitting on top of Firebase storage, I wouldn't recommend using it anyway, because Firebase storage inherently out of the box is garbage. Now you can make it faster and make it better if you know how to work within the Google Cloud environment, but just kind of out of the box availability to most low coders that want to use it that way, Firebase storage is slow and expensive, and I wouldn't use it. And then you get version control, which that should be free, and I guess it probably is. It's like a tag on. But all right, so, and looking at no rate limit, so that's kind of a curious one to me. So the way that Buildship is working is they're kind of standing, I guess, best way to describe it would be they're like a proxy. They're a proxy API. When you make an API call, if you're using Buildship, your call is going to initially come to Buildship, to the endpoint that you created with them, and then that call will be bounced, relayed, whatever you want to call it, through the Buildship proxy to the endpoint for the actual API, whether that's ChatGPT or OpenAI or Replicate or any of those other AIs or other APIs that you plan on using. This is serving as just kind of a proxy for that to happen. And they say, well, you get no rate limit, but see, that no rate limit applies to Buildship, which means you're not going to get rate limited for sending API calls to Buildship. But a lot of the APIs that they're serving a proxy for do have rate limits. So just because you could send 10,000 calls a second to Buildship doesn't mean that OpenAI is going to allow 10,000 calls to them. More than likely, you're going to get like maybe 100 to 250 calls a minute coming in, at least initially, until you're a higher tiered customer. So you'll definitely get rate limited on the end side of the API call. So this whole no rate limit concept, especially when using kind of that proxy sort of service where you bounce over to an actual endpoint beyond Buildship, the no rate limit as a selling point doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, quite frankly. That means nothing, because that their rate limit is irrelevant if everyone else has a rate limit. All right, so that's something to take into account. Then you look at these more expensive plans, which basically just kind of like, I guess, give you more stuff. Okay, so $79 a month, you can now use unlimited workflows. You're already getting that in FlutterFlow. You're getting more execution hours, but that's still in relation to media-centric AI. Still not a lot. You still do better with direct contact with an AI. 1 terabyte of storage, if it's still sitting on top of Firebase storage, I don't care if they give me 10 billion terabytes of storage, I wouldn't use Firebase storage, doesn't matter. But the main thing here for this upgrade is this no cold start. If you don't know what that means, so what that tells me immediately is that Buildship's nodes or servers or whatever you want to call them, when they're not in use, they sit in a dormant state, which means that they're turned on. But I guess the best way to kind of explain it would be like your computer. Your computer is on, but it's in sleep mode. So it's in sleep mode, but it's running, but it's asleep. And then when you go to wake up your computer, depending on how powerful your computer is, it might take a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes for everything to get rolling again and kind of start up and get to moving. So this no cold start means that with this plan, you're going, when you send a call to Buildship, you're going to hit a node that is potentially asleep. And so if it's currently asleep, then you have to wait for it to boot up before it processes your call. And beyond that, a lot of endpoint APIs for AI, they also use cold start. So now you're doubling your cold start time if you're going with this plan. If you go with this one, then you get to access a hot node, which is always on, always available. But again, you're paying a premium for that. Okay, so something to take into consideration. And then, of course, this most expensive plan, which really is, that's pretty expensive. And again, all of this stuff that they're offering you, you can do all of this without them. That's just the reality of it. You don't need this. You don't need any of this. I would take the time to actually learn how to do an API rather than taking the time to learn how to do it here. And so, that's my kind of my take, rundown, my take on this with Buildship. I have a number of reasons why I wouldn't use it. To summarize, it's just more middleware that could be a potential point of failure. It is also more money that's unnecessarily spent. It's more stuff that I would have to figure out exactly how their different little workflow is working when I could easily just go plug these things in directly to FlutterFlow. So it's a waste of time, in my opinion. And it's just another reliance upon another no-code, low-code system that more or less just stands as kind of like a gate between your infrastructure and your app. And the less you have of those third-party gates, the better. So that's my opinion. I will not be giving any tutorials on how to use Buildship with FlutterFlow, because I would not recommend using it. If you decide to go with Buildship, if it's for you, then great. I'm not going to stand in your way. By all means, have at it. But I'm also of the opinion that if I'm going to sit here and give you my opinion on Buildship and tell you why I feel like it's a waste of money and a waste of time, I should also do something to kind of show you why it's a waste of money and a waste of time, and how to leverage the things you already have available to you in FlutterFlow, and using cloud functions, whether it's Firebase, Supabase, or any of the other ones that support cloud functions. They're all virtually the same. And how to use cloud functions to your advantage for doing API calls directly out of FlutterFlow. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put together a mini series. In that mini series, I'm going to go over how to do these API calls without needing Buildship, without needing Make, without needing Zapier, without having to pay this extra money, setting up this extra middleware stuff that's just really not great for creating a really strong, scalable application platform. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and walkthroughs on how to do that. And I'm gonna keep it simplified as much as possible, so that even the absolute no coder that really has no idea what they're doing, if you apply yourself, you'll be able to pick up and figure this out. Again, it's not hard. And of course, with my Patreon, I should note this little mini series for how to do this sort of stuff outside of Buildship. It's going to be free. I'm not going to put it on Patreon or anything like that. You will have to join my Discord community if you want to view it, but that's free, because that's where I'll be hosted. It won't be here on YouTube. That'll be freely accessible. However, at some point, I will be doing some much more in-depth tutorials into more technical versions of APIs, and also developing your own API endpoints on your own servers, things like that. And that'll be available on my Patreon if you want to really dive into the thicket of how it works. But all right, I think I've spent enough time explaining this. I hope that was reasonably informative. As always, do your own research, make your own decisions. If Buildship is for you, then Godspeed, have at it. I hope it works out for you, and I hope it does what you're wanting it to do, and you get it all figured out. But if you listen to this overview and you think, well, maybe Buildship isn't the way to go, then come join us on Discord, and I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to do this stuff inside of FlutterFlow, save some money, and make it efficient, safe, secure, and cut out more of this kind of bloatware that your app doesn't need, for sure. So, all right, that's it for this. Hope everybody has a good... Discord. You can access my Discord. I'll put a link in the description of this video. It's also on my channel bio. So you can find us over there. All right. Have a good one.